I picked Jeffrey McDonald for my, what's it called, familicide
Sure.
pick. Have you, what?
I said sure, that sounds right.
Okay. Have either of you guys heard of him before?
Probably when you get into the story, yes.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because apparently he's pretty famous, but I'd never heard of him before. So, on February 17th, 1970, at 3:42 a.m., 4 military police officers responded to what they had assumed was a domestic dispute at 544 Castle Drive, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. When they arrived, the front door was locked and the lights were off. They went to the back, where they found the back screen door closed and unlocked, but then the interior door was open. They find Colette, Kimberly, and Kristen dead in their bedrooms. Kimberly was 5 years old, and she was in her bed under the covers. She was bludgeoned to death and stabbed 8 to 10 times in the head and neck. Kristen was 2 years old. She was found in her bed under the covers. She was stabbed 33 times with a knife and 15 times with an ice pick. And then Colette, Colette was pregnant at the time. She was found on the floor of her bedroom. She had been clubbed to death. Both arms were broken. She was stabbed 21 times with an ice pick and stabbed 16 times with a knife. Her husband's pajama top was on her chest, and the word pig was smeared on her headboard with blood. Jeffrey McDonald, the husband and father, was found alive but wounded. He was laying next to Colette's bed. His wounds were superficial. He had bruises and cuts on his face and chest, alongside a minor concussion. There was a stab wound on his torso, described as clean, small, and sharp, and this caused his lung to partially collapse. So clearly there were separate stories about what happened on that night. So McDonald claims that the events of that night were as follows. He fell asleep on his living room couch, and he awoke to his wife screaming, "Jeffrey, why are they doing this?" and his daughter screaming, "Daddy." He gets up and sees a black man, 2 white men, and a white woman in a large floppy black hat with blonde hair. The woman reportedly screams, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs," several times.
Oh my god, yes, I know this one.
While he is attempting to get up, the black man strikes him in the head. He falls back on the couch and tries once again to get up. He grapples with the man and touches a baseball bat, and that's how he knows that a baseball bat was used to hit him and his family. He feels a pain in his chest, but he doesn't know why. He later states that he realizes now that it was probably his lung collapsing, but he never knew he was stabbed or cut during the incident. He then proceeds to pass out on the floor, but before he's out, he sees a pair of light-colored go-go boots in front of him. When he wakes up, he rushes to his bedroom, where he finds his wife beaten and stabbed to death. He takes off his pajama top and presses it to her chest and attempts to give her CPR. He then proceeds to his daughter's rooms, where he finds them dead.
Was the fucking Easter Bunny there too?
Jesus Christ. You got it right.
Sorry.
You're fine. And then he calls for help. The CID didn't believe a word of what he said. McDonald claimed to have fought against 3 men, but there were very few signs of a struggle. There was only a table that was knocked over and a vase that was knocked over. There were no fibers of a torn pajama top in the living room, but they did find the fibers under Colette's body and in his daughter's rooms. And then there was 1 fiber under Kristen's fingernail. And the murder weapons were outside the back door. The kitchen knife, ice pick, and a 3-foot-long piece of lumber were all determined to have come from the McDonald home. Bloody and torn surgical gloves were found beneath the headboard, where the word pig was smeared. They are the same ones found in the kitchen that McDonald frequently used. He was a surgeon for the Army. So, one theory that was proposed by the CID involves a statistical anomaly. Every member of the McDonald family had different blood types. So, this is their theory. A fight breaks out between Jeffrey and Colette. Colette hits Jeffrey with a hairbrush, causing his minor concussion. He retaliates by hitting her with his fists and then with a piece of lumber. Don't know where a piece of lumber came from. That was not explained, but apparently in their bedroom somewhere. Kimberly then walks in and is struck in the head, possibly accidentally, and they get this because Kimberly's blood and brain serum were found in the doorway. McDonald then carries Kimberly back to her room. He stabs her. Her blood was found on his pajama top. even though he said he wasn't wearing it because he took it off to press into Colette's wounds before he went to the girls' rooms. He then goes to Kristen's room. Colette regains consciousness and stumbles in. She throws herself over Kristen. Colette's blood was found on Kristen's bed covers. And then after MacDonald kills both of them, he wraps Colette's body in a sheet and carries her back to the bedroom. MacDonald then uses articles on the Manson family he found in Esquire magazine, and this magazine was in his living room, to cover up the murders. He puts on his surgical gloves and heads to the master bedroom where he writes "pig" on the headboard with Colette's blood. He puts his pajama top on her chest and stabs her over and over with an ice pick. He then uses a scalpel and stabs himself once. He calls for an ambulance, discards of weapons, gloves, and a scalpel, and lies down next to his dead wife's body. So, on July 5th, 1970, an Article 32 hearing convened, and it lasted through September. MacDonald was represented by Bernard Siegel, I don't know how you pronounce it. Siegel focused on the poor quality of the investigation and the possibility of other witnesses. Siegel argued that the CID lost evidence. They lost the gloves that he supposedly used to write "pig" on the wall, and they lost a layer of skin found under Colette's fingernails. And then he presented Helena Stockley, the woman MacDonald. My notes are weird. So they then presented Helena Stockley, the woman that MacDonald claims to have seen in his home. She was a known drug user in town, and witnesses claimed she admitted to involvement in the crime, and many remembered her wearing clothing similar to what MacDonald described. And then the man that's in charge of it, Colonel Rock, recommends charges be dropped because he believed there was not sufficient evidence, and he recommends authorities investigate Stockley instead of MacDonald. So MacDonald then returns to work. He makes an appearance on the Dick Cavett show, where he makes jokes about the investigation and complains about them focusing on him as a suspect. Yep. And then Colette's father, don't tell me I didn't write his name down. His last name's Kassab. I forgot to write down his first name. He originally supported Jeffrey, but then he starts to question everything as time carries on, especially after his appearance on the Dick Cavett show, where he's acting just... I don't know how to explain it. He's just being really rude, I guess, about the situation, and he's has
treating
a lot of
it like
pride.
a joke, right?
Yeah. Oh, Freddie Kassab, that's his name. So he starts looking into everything a little bit more, and he discovers that he discovers that Jeffrey's account of the night during the hearing was different from what he had told Freddie Kassab. So they were completely different stories. MacDonald also admits later on to lying to Kassab when he told him that he and his friends had tracked down one of the killers and murdered them. He admits to that lie, I think, in court to get Kassab off his back. So he lied to him several times. MacDonald had also told the court that he sustained life-threatening injuries, but Kassab remembered seeing MacDonald sitting up in bed with very few bandages after the whole incident happened. Kassab placed a complaint in 1972, but since initial investigation occurred on an army base, the citizen complaint wasn't carried through. But then after 2 years, they finally submit a citizen's complaint with their attorneys to Judge Butler, and a grand jury is convened on August 12th, 1974, and Franklin Dupree oversees the hearing. So MacDonald was indicted. This is where it just becomes a huge fucking mess. I mean, it already started, but, it just gets bad. MacDonald was indicted on January 24th, 1975, and then on May 23rd, he was arraigned and pleaded not guilty. On July 29th, Judge Dupree denies his claims of double jeopardy and speedy trial arguments, and the trial date stays at August 18th, 1975. So we're already at 5 years after this whole thing happened. On August 15th, the Court of Appeals stayed the trial, and then January 23rd, 1976, a panel ordered the indictment dismissed on speedy trial grounds. May 1st, 1978, the indictment is reinstated. October 22nd, 1978, his double jeopardy arguments were rejected, and March 19th, they refused to review their decisions again. So the trial begins on July 16th, 1979. So now we're 9 years later. So during the trial, the prosecution submits the 1970 copy of the Esquire magazine containing the Manson article to suggest that this was where Jeffrey got the idea of the Manson-esque killers. And then the prosecution also demonstrates how the stab marks on the pajama top were not consistent with his story. He claims to have wrapped his pajama top in his hands for self-defense, but the marks aligned more with being laid on a body and stabbed repeatedly. He also had no defense wounds on his body, which would have been evidence of the struggle that he talked about. They then presented an audio tape of MacDonald talking about the murders. He spoke very matter-of-factly until they questioned his involvement in it. He became really angry, and then they brought up the fact that he was having affairs, and he very calmly responded, "Oh, you guys are more thorough than I thought."
Oh my God.
Yep. But the prosecution struggled with developing a motive. The judge would not allow in any reports from the military investigation, leaving any motives determined by them moot. So one theory that they had during that time was that I guess he was required to take diet pills while he was in the army, and some said that maybe he was on too many of them, and then combined with stress, he had some sort of like drug-induced rage fit. I don't know. But they couldn't bring that argument in at all. And then Dupree also denied requests for a psychological evaluation of MacDonald. So the defense calls Helena Stokely to the witness stand. He was hoping to extract an admission of guilt from her, as she had stated over the 9 years since this happened that she had been there, but she had also been saying she hadn't been there. She'd been going back and forth several times. And then Dupree ended up refusing any evidence connected to her at all because of her history with long-term drug abuse. So they couldn't even use her testimony, and then they also had witnesses to present who heard Stokely admit to being at the scene, so they couldn't use any of that. And then they called on their own forensic expert to contest the expert on the prosecution side about the stab wounds in the pajama top. And then on August 29th, 1979, he was convicted of 1 count first-degree murder for the death of Kristen, who was the 2-year-old, and 2 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of Colette and Kimberly. It only took the jury 6 hours to determine the conviction, and then Dupree gave him 3 life sentences served consecutively, and he also revoked his bail. Oh, whoa, where are my notes going? Okay. So then July 29th, 1980, his conviction is overturned. A court of appeals determines the 9 years it took to convict him violated his right to a speedy trial. So back at this again.
Was he sitting in jail this 9 years or not?
I think he was in and out.
Okay.
Because, like, every time he was indicted, they probably arrested him again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they arrested him, or they would indict him, and then they would go back, and it happened several times. I didn't put it all in here because it was way too much. But they went back and forth just over and over again. Yeah. So, yeah, on July 29th, his conviction is overturned. A court of appeal, yeah. Anyways, I already said all that. So then he's freed on a $100,000 bail, and returns to Long Beach as a director of emergency medicine. So then 2 years later, December 31st, 1982, they rule his rights to a speedy trial were not actually violated. So then he's rearrested and returned to federal prison. His conviction was unanimously affirmed on August 16th, 1982. And then in 1983, all of his licenses to practice medicine were revoked. So on March 27th, 1991, he becomes eligible for parole, but he refuses to apply because he wants to maintain his innocence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so several appeals were denied after his conviction. Like I said, I can't write them all down because they just kept going back and forth constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then the defense lawyers attempted to argue evidence was suppressed, but every time it was rejected. And then in 2006, DNA evidence revealed that Stokely's DNA was not found on any of their samples that they took from the crime scene. But they actually found like a bunch of his hair, like on, like in the kids' bedrooms and on Colette's hands and stuff like that. But he lived there, so
Right.
I don't know about that. But then in 2005, he went up for parole, but it was immediately denied. So his next hearing is actually in May 2020, so it's coming up. But he got married again in his time in prison. In 2002, he married Catherine Courage. They met in Baltimore decades earlier and reconnected when she sent him a letter asking how she could help with his case. And they were married in at a federal prison in California.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
It's like, girl,
Yeah.
listen, you dodged this bullet once. Why are you trying to get back in there?
He's single now.
I guess that's true. I mean, whatever. Listen, the dating world is hard.
It's true.
It's hard to find somebody.
Yep. But yep, that's Jeffrey McDonald. He apparently, I didn't put this in my notes, but he testified three times, and each time he didn't have to. He was actually advised not to.
Of course,
but
they always advise them not to, and
Right.
guess
Yeah.
what?
Yeah,
The stupid
and
ones don't take it. The advice.
Yeah. And I watched an interview with the prosecution's lawyer or attorney or whatever. I'm not good with these legal terms, but he was saying that he felt like him testifying was the worst decision that he could make because he came off as so arrogant and prideful that the jury was never going to accept anything that he said just because he was like so nasty the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's how like everybody who knew him described him. He was just like really shitty, and I guess he and his wife got into fights and he cheated on her all the time. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I've never heard of this case, but it was definitely the basis for an episode of Law and Order SVU.
Really?
I knew this case.
Yes.
I knew it because of the Manson mimic and also because of the blood types being different.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so funny. How is that even possible?
I have no idea.
Because, oh shit. Sorry, I just yanked my headphone out. But how is that even possible? Because, like, if, like, my mom's blood is O, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my dad's blood is B. So, my sister and I could either be O or B, and that's it. We could not be A-type blood, otherwise our father would not be our father.
I have no idea.
That is, like, how is... Because I could see, okay, so if the mom is A and the dad is B, then one of the kids could be AB.
Mm-hmm.
But then the only other possibility is O. And how could the other kid be O if all the parents had to contribute was an A or B? Unless they mean the positive and negative was all different.
That might have been it.
I don't know. This is
don't
interesting.
know.
I'm going to have to look into
Yeah.
this further because...
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have no idea.
There's a book out there that was actually, this is kind of funny. So during his trial, Jeffrey hired this author to basically follow him and write a book about him and basically write a book about how he was innocent.
How hard he's had it.
Yes. The author's name was McGinnis. And after Jeffrey was put in prison, McGinnis released his book, and it was 100% like, this guy is an asshole and he's guilty. and
That's awesome.
yeah, and he sued him, and he won.
Oh.
But
Well, I'm sure he did. I mean,
Yeah.
if what they signed the contract for or whatever was, you know, for him to write a positive portrayal and he didn't,
Yeah.
then he
I
did
bet
breach the
that
contract.
author was
but...
like 100% worth it.
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
completely worth
I
it.
saw
yeah.
this coming. So
Yep.
worth it.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so there's a book out there that somebody who worked directly with him. I mean, he was supposed to be on his defense team.
Yeah.
So there's a book out there by somebody who worked directly with him. There's a documentary. I didn't have time to watch it. It was 2 hours. But there's a documentary out there that's telling the other side of the story, like arguing that he didn't do it. So I'm kind of interested in watching that.
Yeah, I am too, but then I don't want to
But-
believe that he didn't do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I already can't imagine how they would argue it, but yeah. So and it's on YouTube, so you can watch it on YouTube, and then you can watch a video of the prosecution's lawyer, attorney, whatever, talking about the trial himself in a roundtable discussion, which I watched. So yeah.
Yeah. It
There's a lot
definitely
of stuff
sounds
out there.
It definitely sounds like it's one of those cases where like he definitely did it, but like the cops and the prosecution did not really do as good of a job as they could have to like solidify that like 100% yes he did it.
Right.
You know, and
So that's
I mean
why we're going
exactly.
on
So
and
that's
on
why
like
he's
this.
still like plausibly out there denying, because there's
Yeah.
like just enough like sliver of doubt left that some people would buy it that he was innocent. I mean, to me, the fact that he was on TV laughing about his kids dying is like sort of the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
Like, that's really what pushed me over the edge into, yes, he's definitely guilty.
Yeah.
Like, who does that? That's not funny. Like, regardless of whether you did it or not, and if you were falsely accused or not, your kids and your wife, your pregnant wife, are dead.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a joke. I don't get it. Yeah. I mean, everyone grieves differently, but, like, that's a bridge too far.
That's that's not normal.
That's so interesting.
I mean, you had me at he had minor injuries, and the rest of them were brutally,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
murdered.
yeah. I mean, that's
Well,
definitely
yeah.
suspect.
No.
And he was at the time, so they're on an army base, right? And he was at the time the only guy around. There wasn't, for whatever reason, he was the only one in the area. So you're trying to tell me that like the only person who possibly had a chance of stopping these people is the only one who's alive. They like
Right.
killed a pregnant woman and 2 tiny children, but they didn't kill the guy that was most likely to stop them. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, and like...
And the whole like acid is groovy.
It's like he's never read a detective novel before, and he's like, oh shit, I just committed a murder. Wait, these people committed a murder. I better read all about it. Like,
Right. Right. I mean, acid is groovy. The white go-go boots. I mean, that's that's too much. And I'm sorry, but if I were going to go out and like murder random people, I would not go onto a military base to do it. Because those people have guns and they're like trained in hand-to-hand combat. Like,
Yeah.
like they could kill you in like 2 minutes. I mean, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yep. And also, like, I love that he said, like, he has a punctured lung, right? And he's like, oh, my chest hurt. And all I was thinking was, man, this guy must be really beating me up. But I didn't feel anybody cut me. But my chest or my lungs deflated. Like,
Right. I mean,
you
I
got
think...
a full-on freaking cut into your abdomen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Adrenaline. I would say adrenaline on that because I've heard stuff like that. Like remember the lady who like had her baby almost cut out of her? She had to like some lady was pretending to be a pregnant lady with the same name as her. It was on an I Survived or something.
Oh my god, no.
Yeah, and she like lured her into her house and tried to cut the baby out of her, and this lady like made it out, but she's...
Oh my god.
And the baby was fine, but she had suffered really severe wounds, and I think she said while she was having it happen, she couldn't feel it. Like, she was just...
Yeah.
Because your body does
God.
crazy shit when...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, your body will... like stop you from feeling it at some point.
And if you're in shock, then you I assume you don't feel it. I don't know. I hope never
that makes sense.
to have that experience, but
Yeah.
So I could see that. But the fact that
makes sense.
The fact that he had such minor injuries compared to the rest of them.
Right,
It's kinda like, really, dude. Seriously.
Yeah. No, this is definitely an episode of Law & Order SVU. Because he, like, kills his wife, he kills his 2 kids, and then he shoots himself in the head, but he, like, angles it so that it, like, grazes him. So it looks like they missed.
Uh-huh.
Right? And he said that he, like, played dead until they left. But then, like, I don't remember. Stabler and Benson figure it out.
Wasn't there a guy... Was it Sam Shepard? Or am I mixing that up with something else?
Sam Shepard was the fugitive.
Okay.
He was the one who they thought he killed his wife, and he said no, it was someone that broke in the house.
Yeah.
And nobody believed him, and then, like, it turned out that he was telling the truth.
Oh, he was telling the truth. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Damn.
Yeah, no, he was innocent.
What's sad is there are so many cases like this that I can't, like, I mix up the details of them in my head.
I know. All these kids dying. Wow.
Yeah.
Nikki, yours is upsetting, so...
Yeah, mine's upsetting,
if I take my headphones out at one point, don't be offended.
That's okay. I mean, it's not really, honestly, most of it's how much of a dipshit Chris Watts is. So...
Oh, God. Sorry.
I mean, he's such a...
I'm not prepared to go through this again.
It's literally the same story you just told with some different details.
Yeah.
So, and it's much more recent, so that's part of the impact, I think.
Oh, yeah.
So I got this info from a documentary from the Morbid Minds YouTube channel, and they got their info from the redacted case file from November 21st, 2018. And they did a really good job, I must say. Anyway, so I'm going to do like a really half-ass version of what they did. So, these notes are all over the place, so give me a second. So, 2009... a woman named Shanann meets Chris Watts through a friend, and she goes on a blind date with him. And she didn't really want to date anyone at the time for various reasons. She had some health issues, and, you know, I think she had just gone through a divorce. But she ended up eventually dating him anyway. He proposed to her in 2011, and they were married in November of 2012. And they moved from North Carolina to Colorado, having a $400,000 house built in 2013. Wow. So, yeah, pretty nice house. Late in 2013, Shanann had her first daughter. Her name was Bella. Their second daughter, Celeste, followed in 2015. So we've spanned like 6 years here. The children, unfortunately, had medical issues too, and they were not properly diagnosed for years, so they were in and out of the hospital. And Chris and Shanann had incurred quite a few medical bills. They had a $2,800 a month mortgage and only made $90K a year combined. So they began to struggle financially. And then Shanann had to get neck surgery, and that cost $25,000.
Yeah.
So, like, this is stressing me out already, and they're all still alive. Just like the video, anything. And they eventually filed for bankruptcy in 2015. So by 2016, Shanann was working for a multi-level sales company, and she was doing really well at it. She became kind of somewhat of a presence for that brand, and she began making quite a nice salary for it. And in 2017, a woman named Nicole Kessinger, who was one of Chris's coworkers, he worked at a petroleum company, did a Google search for Shanann's name for the first time. That's going to be important later. Shanann discovered she was pregnant again in May 2018, and then in June she went on a trip to see her family in North Carolina with the kids, and Chris planned to join them on the last week of this trip, but meanwhile she was just gonna go hang out with the kids, and I think maybe her parents she was seeing, I couldn't remember. But things started getting kind of weird. Chris is really short with her, and he keeps avoiding her. And basically, all the evidence, which they have tons of evidence on this, from his cell phone and his paper trail, basically, points to him having an affair with Nicole Kessinger, who's the coworker that searched for Shanann's name. And he keeps making excuses for why he's not talking to Shanann and telling her how much he loves her. But she knows something's up, and finally he tells her that he doesn't feel the same way towards her or the kids anymore, including the unborn child. He doesn't want the child anymore. And I'm like, $50 will bet you he texted that to her. But they didn't say. I'm pretty sure he texted her and didn't tell it. What is it? Lizzo says, "Don't text me, tell it straight to my face." Mm-hmm. Yeah. There we go.
Yep.
So he won't go to marriage counseling, of course, and he is clearly obsessed with this new lady. But another weird thing is he's searching the internet for when to say I love you. What do you feel when someone tells you they love you? And how does it feel when someone says I love you? Like he doesn't know. Like he has no capacity for empathy, and he has to Google search about emotions related to other people. That is the single scariest thing I've ever heard in my life. Anyway, after 5 weeks of this whole bullshit, he flies to North Carolina to meet Shanann and his children. And by this time, he's in a really good mood, of course, because he's been banging this other lady. But throughout the week, he becomes quieter and quieter and more detached from her. And Nicole Kessinger, on her end, starts searching for wedding dresses online. According to Kessinger, Chris and Shanann then had a conversation about their marriage, and they decided to call it quits. But I think this would probably be news to Shanann because she tells her friend on August 7th, which is the day they're supposed to fly back to Colorado, and this is a quote, "Chris told me last night he's scared to death about this third baby, and he's happy with just Bella and Celeste and doesn't want another baby. He has changed. I don't know who he is." So clearly there's some disjoint between what he's saying and what she's saying to her friends. Mm-hmm. The next day, Shanann has a 15-week scan scheduled at 7 p.m. and she contacts friends to tell them she's canceling her gender reveal party. She had one planned, but obviously things aren't going so well with Chris, so she's like really not in the mood to celebrate. And she starts disclosing the gender of the baby. It's a boy, and she's going to name it Nico to some select friends. And between this time and the next day, when she goes on a business trip, it seems like she and Chris have decided they're going to try couples therapy. However, while she's on her business trip, he sends her this really weird photo of one of the kids laying on the couch covered in a white sheet with their feet sticking out. So it looks like he's just covered up a corpse.
The fuck?
Yeah, I know, and she just kind of like goes, I don't know what to think about that. Anyway, so let me think.
That's like, ugh.
Yeah, that's really.
I know.
That made me so uncomfortable.
And you can see all these. You can see all the contact. You can read their text messages. You can see all the photos. That's part of what makes this case so, I guess, real and present. So another day goes by, and Shanann is on her way home. She returns back to her home at 1:48 a.m. on August 13th. At 5:30 a.m., Chris had offered the previous day to go check a couple work sites for his job. So at 8:30, so he goes and does that. And then at 8:30, he calls his daughter's school, and he tells them that they will no longer be attending. And then he calls their realtor, because he wants to sell the house. So upon not hearing from Shanann, the friend that picked her up from the airport, who is a total badass, by the way, goes to the house, knocks around maybe noon, and things are looking really weird because she knows that Shanann had a doctor's appointment that morning, and she never heard from her or anything. They must have been really, really close. So this friend has the code for the door, and she enters the code. Chris gets a notification that the door is open, and he calls this friend. And she voices her concern, saying, like, hey, look, you should, your wife is missing, I think. Something's wrong here. And he says, don't worry, she's on a play date, So this friend doesn't buy it, like, even for a second. Go her. She starts calling everyone she knows who could know them, and she tries to break in again. And this time Chris calls her and tells her to leave and not to call the police or kick the door in. The friend goes to Shanann's doctor's office where she was supposed to have the appointment that morning, and she had not shown up. So the friend rushes back to the house, and Chris calls again saying, okay, I'm on the way, but it'll be an hour. So after an hour, when he doesn't show up, she calls the police to come do a welfare check. It's been 2 hours. It's 1:50 p.m. and the police finally call Chris and they say, like, hey, where are you? And he says he'll be there in 5 minutes.
Oh my God.
Dear Lord. He is not there in 5 minutes.
Shocker.
And arrives just as they're about to break down the door. So surprising. I thought he was such a reliable person. Anyway, so they find Shanann's wedding ring on the nightstand and her cell phone in between the couch cushions, which is increasingly worrying because for her job, she used her cell phone a lot. She did marketing, like online marketing. So now Shanann's mother is calling, and she's worried. And specifically, she thinks that Chris has something to do with Shanann going missing right away. She's like, yeah, he totally did it. A day later, no one's found Shanann or the children, and Chris is gone girling the shit out of this. He's giving interviews and begging for them to return home, says he slept with every light on in the house, and waiting for the kids to run through the door. You can watch this interview. I just want to punch him in his smug little face.
I remember just being so pissed.
I remember this happened. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, me too.
And this was when they were still missing. And I was like, yeah, he did it. Wait a day.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Also, he was asked if Shanann could be having an affair, and he said it was, quote, totally possible. But when he was asked if he's been having an affair, he says, nah, I have not done that.
Oh, my God.
Nah, bro. No way.
So Nicole Kessinger contacted authorities by herself and disclosed that she was having an affair with Chris. And Chris took a polygraph and failed it miserably. And so they started interrogating him. And during the interrogation, the police go to that job site Chris was on early in the morning. And they find a missing sheet from the bed and some overturned dirt, like a shallow grave. After 5 hours of interrogation, Chris says he wants to tell the truth. He said... The truth. He said Shanann and he had gotten into an argument early in the morning the day she disappeared, and after he came back upstairs he saw her strangling Celeste, who had turned blue, and saw on the baby monitor that Bella was already dead. He then strangled Shanann and took the bodies to his job site. He buried Shanann near the oil tanks and threw his daughters in. So, like, what? I don't think anyone's bothering with believing this bullshit. They're able to arrest him off of it. He pleads guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and 3 counts of tampering with a corpse, and was given life without the possibility of parole. And the reason he did that was because basically the reason he confessed was because he could avoid the death penalty with the details. And the mistress... She searched the internet for Amber Frey, Scott Peterson's mistress. She wanted to know about her book deal, Frey's net worth, and whether or not people hated her.
Wow.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, that's...
Jesus.
It's so much worse. Like, if you were to get into, like, when he confesses what actually happened, it's, like, horrific. I mean, like, the older daughter, I believe. Like, which one was older?
Bella. She was 4, Celeste was 3.
Sees him, so he kills Shanann at the house, and then loads the daughters in the car, or the truck, or whatever, drives the wife's dead body to the work site, kills Celeste, and then Bella is begging him, please, Daddy, don't hurt me like you hurt Celeste. Mm-hmm. And then he strangles her to death.
I didn't know that he killed them at the job site.
Yeah, so so after he was convicted, he gave, like, a full confession to the FBI, I think, for, like, their profiling stuff.
Oh, so that must have been the deal where he didn't get the death penalty if he confessed to doing it.
To when you plead guilty, you have to give details of your crime.
Yeah, but he had said the reason he did it was because Shanann was strangling the children.
Right.
So I didn't know at which point the story changed to the actual truth.
After he pled guilty.
Okay.
Then it changed to what actually happened.
So before his sentencing, he spilled the beans so he could...
Oh, no, this was after he was already sentenced.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah,
because I was listening to Murder Squad today, and Paul Holes and Billy Jensen said something about this case, and something about how Chris Watts avoided the death penalty by giving details, but I didn't know which details they were.
Well,
they
he
didn't
probably...
say.
I mean, so the way that I remember it happening is that the plea deal was, if you plead guilty and we don't have to take this to trial, we will take the death penalty off the table.
Okay, yeah.
Basically.
Okay.
Because, I mean, death penalty trials are hugely expensive.
Yeah, I know. And I wouldn't want to waste any
expensive.
money on that asshole.
Yeah. Extremely expensive. And it's way more expensive to have a death penalty trial and keep somebody on death row than it is to keep them in prison for life. So, anyway, that's how I remember it happening. But then I remember maybe like 5 or 6 months after he pled guilty and was sentenced, there was an article, probably in People magazine, because I'm always clicking on those true crime articles, even though they always make me upset, where he described what happened.
Okay.
And then there was just an article a couple weeks ago about the, 1 year anniversary or whatever of him being convicted, and how he lives with guilt every day. And I'm like, you know what?
God.
I fucking hope so.
This guy is a class fucking act. And there is no way that he feels a shred of guilt. This guy is searching on the internet for how you feel when someone says, I love you.
Right. No, he doesn't
That
feel guilt.
is...
How can you murder your 2 children and feel nothing? Well, I don't get that. I mean, okay, he's having a fight with the wife. He wants the wife gone so he can marry this mistress. You kill the wife. Not that that's right, but I guess, okay, in a twisted mind, I can see where that makes sense. But how do you justify killing 2 little girls?
I don't know.
Because he sees them as property.
Well, right. I mean, if you feel normal human emotion, how do you justify that?
You don't.
Yeah. Well, and because Nikki, when you said you were doing this, I think I said, like, I didn't recognize the name at first, so I had to Google it for a second. But, like, the first thing that comes up is that article in People where it's titled, Chris Watts is in his own hell after murdering his family.
Fucking good.
God. I didn't read that because I didn't have time. And there's hours of footage you can watch from the family, you can go and read the case file. I didn't have time to do that. I was like, I got to do the short and sweet version. And I'm glad I didn't have to read that because I was already angry enough when I finished.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know that.
I know.
I feel like a lot of the times when we do true crime, it's never something that has happened during my lifetime, or at least happened at a time that I would remember it. But I, like, very distinctly remember this happening and being so pissed. And there actually being people out there saying, like, no, he didn't do it.
His parents.
Yeah.
His parents are probably still in denial that he's guilty.
Oh, yeah.
They think that Shanann was this, like, horrible, evil, manipulative bitch who basically murdered her own kids, and he had no choice but to murder her.
Yeah.
Which, again...
That shouldn't even be your response.
She's murdering your children, and so you grab her out of fury or panic to try and stop her. Why drive the bodies to a field and dump them? I mean...
Yeah.
I cannot imagine how nasty of a human being you would have to be to take your own child's body and dump it.
Yeah.
You know, that's disgusting. Like, oh, what a piece of shit. And I remember, this is another thing I remember, is that People, again, and actually a lot of news outlets, kept running pictures of them as a family.
Yeah.
And people on the internet, there was this huge outcry. Like, he killed them.
Yeah.
Show pictures of her with the 2 girls without him. He's the reason that they are dead. And so a lot of news outlets, like, changed the way that they were running photos of victims because they were, especially victims of, like, domestic incidents.
Yeah.
Because so many times they would post a picture of the woman, usually, with her killer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As, like, the lead photo. And it's like, no, he's, you can't show them as a happy family photo.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course...
I do remember that, too.
Yeah, of course, people always bringing up, well, he's white, and so, of course, they're showing him, who murdered his entire family, as, you know, this smiling, happy family man.
Yeah.
But then you have, like, Mike Brown, who was killed by a police officer, and what's the picture they're showing of him? It looks like a mugshot.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
And he was killed. He wasn't a killer.
Yeah.
He was the one that was killed.
I think even along those lines, I was actually wondering while I was doing this is, are we so enraged about this because it is the middle-class, nuclear, white family, you know, that it's happening to? Like, is the media so hooked up in it because that happened? I mean, certainly something like this is happening to more marginalized people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
I think... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think there was a little bit of that Ted Bundy aspect to it, too, where everybody thought that he was super attractive. I remember that being a thing.
Yeah. Ew, I didn't see that.
Oh, everybody talking about how he was, like, good-looking and charming and all this kind of stuff, and so I feel like there was a bit of that, like, Ted Bundy layer to it as well.
I mean, he is a good-looking man, but, like, ew.
Yeah, no.
He's like you say, well, attractive.
Obviously, ew, but, like, this is the same response that they had with Ted Bundy.
Oh, I know.
But that's what I'm saying, is, like, yeah, it's gross, but, like, it was the same kind of response. You know, he couldn't do it. Look at him.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
He couldn't do it. He's average. He's maybe even, like, a picture of what an American quote-unquote family is supposed to be. Like, he and everything he had. So that's why it's more shocking to people.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. And I think that them being white, middle class, definitely... I mean, it's definitely, like, missing white woman syndrome. Mm-hmm. I mean, it definitely adds to it.
Oh, and 2 little girls. And she was pregnant. Like, that's everything.
Right.
And the husband did it. I mean, that's...
Right.
That's
and he was having an affair.
Wants.
Yep.
And he was having an affair with a woman who's willing to talk to the media.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, that was a mess.
Well, okay, so the one happy thing here is that the police did their jobs this time. Like, they really used all their resources, and they brought him in as quick as they could. It was like
that
days.
Is nice.
2 days, that is maybe.
Good.
Yeah.
And they didn't fuck up the case for trial. And
he's in prison forever.
He's in prison forever and ever, and I'm sure that his life in prison is not pleasant because people in prison are not very nice to people who hurt children. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that his life in prison is shitty, which is fine with me.
Yep, I'm good with it.
I have no qualms about it.
I can't get over that picture. Like, I looked up that picture, and it's just, like, it's literally just like a doll. It's a doll under a sheet. But that's the creepiest thing in the world.
No, it's her. It's Bella.
Are you sure? Because, like, the caption said that it was a doll.
Oh, the caption said it was a doll?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
I didn't want to see it.
The one well, so she's still alive at this point. So it's just, like, a weird after the fact, like, hindsight thing.
Okay.
But,
maybe I saw the wrong one. I don't know.
While Shanann was on vacation, she was asking him to send pictures of the kids, and he sent that.
Oh, I see. That's fucking scary. I don't know.
I know.
That, like, oh my god, I don't know why, but that's just getting to me a lot. That's
just so
horrifying.
Nasty. Like, dude.
Yeah.
And I never understand. Like, just get a fucking divorce. Just
the money was a factor, though.
I mean, I know.
I mean, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying,
I know
in his
that's
mind.
what it was. Yeah, that, you know, there would be a big custody battle, and he would look bad because he had an affair, and like you said, the money issue. If she was the one really raking in most of the money.
Yeah.
I might be thinking of something else, but did she have a big life insurance policy on her?
That was probably another case.
I mean, probably, but I don't remember.
You know, probably her and 15 dozen other women who got killed like this, because honestly, we're sitting here telling 3 different versions of the same goddamn story, and that is what is so infuriating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, he's a huge piece of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's weird because it feels like stuff like this just doesn't happen these days.
No, it does.
Saying because it does, but you just don't hear about it.
I think it's underreported unless the family is, like I said, all the demographics that the media.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I think what makes it rare is, you know, you hear about domestic incidents where a man kills his wife or his girlfriend, but then to kill, like, the whole family. Like, I know there was one a couple years ago where it was, like, a woman who was at, like, a football party or something, and her ex, like, came to the football party and, like, shot her whole family and her. And then there was one a couple years ago where it was in Texas, I think, where he drove to, like, 3 different family homes of his, you know, separated wife or ex-wife or whatever, and, like, murdered her and a bunch of her family members. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, they're out there. It just, part of the problem is that, like, the media moves on so fast that if you don't catch it, like, the day that it happens or the next day, you could totally miss it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm sure that there are people who, if I brought up Chris Watts, they would not know who I was talking about.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true.
I mean, the media moves on so fast.
Yeah, no, that's a doll in that picture.
Okay, so the picture that I was talking about?
Yeah, because the feet don't have toes.
Okay, well that would do it, wouldn't it?
That's probably a sign.
And I guess she posted it on her Facebook wall, saying, "I don't know what to think about this. ...
Oh yeah, they definitely misconstrued that then in what I watched, because it sounded like it was something he sent her and she kept to herself, and she said to him, "I don't know what to think about this."
It looks like a Facebook post to me. But stuff can also be fabricated on the internet.
I think
I
might have been.
I do recall that it was something about her posting it on Facebook, but, like, he texted it to her.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then she posted it on Facebook. That sounds right now that you say that.
But it wasn't one of the kids.
I don't remember that, but if it doesn't have toes, I take your word for it.
It must not be one of the kids.
It looks like, it looks like a doll to me. I don't know. I really hope I don't turn out... Well, never mind. It looks like a doll to me. I'm gonna stick with that. Oh, God.
Still, what the fuck? Like, either way.
Right. I mean, unless you and your spouse really both have that kind of, like, dark humor, then that's not appropriate.
God. I can't even imagine having that kind of dark humor, though.
There are people that do. Well, people who think they're really edgy by making those kind, like, dead baby jokes.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Not me.
No. Oh, no. I don't think
anyone
that's funny.
sent that to me, I'd be like, 911?
Yeah. No. I don't think that's funny.
Something's wrong.
Yeah. 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 No, I don't find that kind of stuff funny. But a lot of people do.
Yeah, that's...
I don't know.
Okay, Rachel, what do you got for us on this insane journey we're taking?
This insane journey is about to get more insane. So I chose probably the most famous family annihilator, which everyone's heard of, but I just love it so much.
Actually, I did not know who John List was.
And that makes me really happy because that makes me hope that people listening might not know who he is, so this isn't just like a retread for people.
Yeah.
But John List, this story is, it's crazy. It's crazy. So, so John List was born in Bay City, Michigan, in 1925. He was the only child of John List Sr. and Alma List. He was a devout Lutheran and Sunday school teacher. He was raised in, like, a pretty typical household. you know, his dad was very strict, and his dad had very, for the time, typical ideas about gender norms. You know, like the man must provide for the family. If the man does not provide for the family, he is a failure as a man. Which for the 30s, you know, 20s, 30s, 40s, I mean, that's pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
But no, like, no known, like, abuse or anything like that. So in 1943, John enlisted in the Army and served as a lab technician during World War II. He was honorably discharged in 1946, and then he went to the University of Michigan under the GI Bill, and he got a BA in business administration, and then he went on to get a master's in accounting. In November 1950, he was recalled to military service as the Korean War escalated. So after he was recalled to military service, he was stationed at Fort Eustis in Virginia, and there he met Helen Morris Taylor, who was a war widow. She had a young daughter named Brenda, and her husband had been killed earlier on in the Korean War. About a year later, he and Helen married in December of 1951, and they moved to Northern California because List was assigned to the accounting corps because he was extremely intelligent, and a very, very good accountant. So after that, though, he did end up being sent back to Korea for a second tour. And he returned a year later in 1952. And at that point, he was honorably discharged for good from the U.S. Army. So he and Helen and Brenda moved back to his hometown in Michigan, where John got a job as the supervisor of a paper company's accounting department. And he and Helen proceeded to have 3 children, pretty much one right after the other. In 1955, they had Patricia. In 1956, they had John Jr. And in 1958, they had Frederick. Unfortunately, Helen had her own issues. By 1959, she was a full-on alcoholic and had become increasingly unstable. In 1960, pretty much as soon as she was old enough, Brenda got married and left. That's Helen's daughter from the previous marriage.
Good for her.
She hightailed it out of Dodge. You know, her mom was a mess, and her stepdad was a fucking weirdo, and so she left. So John then moved the rest of the family to Rochester, New York, to take a job with Xerox. In 1965, he accepted a job as vice president and comptroller at a bank in Jersey City, New Jersey. And at that point, he moved his wife, their 3 children, and his mother, Alma, into a mansion in Westfield, New Jersey called Breeze Knoll. This was like a super fancy mansion. It has 19 rooms. It had a ballroom with a Tiffany skylight in it. I mean, it was like crazy huge. The attic, they converted the entire attic into almost like a dowager's apartment for his mother. It was like, it had like an efficiency kitchen. She had like
her own house upstairs.
Basically, yeah. It was like, awesome. It was like an apartment. Yeah, it was like a 1-bedroom apartment upstairs. Like, she had her own little kitchen, she had her own bathroom, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So John List, I mean, so the neighbors didn't really know the List family. They thought they were weird. He would mow the lawn in a shirt and tie. They were not social. They kept to themselves. They did not talk to the neighbors at all. So the neighbors just thought this was some bizarre family living next door, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's all they thought, was just, you know what, they're kind of weirdos. You know, sometimes you meet a weirdo, right? There was there was no domestic violence. There was no police being called. You know, even after everything happened, there's no accusations of domestic violence or anything like that, right? Mm-hmm. They just were kind of a strange family who kept to themselves.
Yeah.
So on November 9th, 1971, the 3 kids went off to school. And Helen was sitting in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee. She was still in her pajamas. And John came up behind her and shot her in the back of the head with a 9mm pistol. He was standing so close to her that the bullet, he put it to her head. The bullet went completely through her skull and embedded in the wall across the kitchen. He then went upstairs to the attic where his mother, who was 85, was also still in her pajamas. She was making breakfast in her little kitchen up there. And he came up and put the gun right above her left eye and shot her. And obviously she died immediately as well. So then he sat in the house for a while, for the rest of the day. And Patricia arrived home after school about 2 p.m. And she came through the door and went to put her stuff down, and her father shot her in the back of the head. And then Frederick, who was 13, came home a short time later, 30 or 40 minutes later, and again went to put his stuff down, and he was shot in the back of the head and killed. So John then went into the kitchen and made himself some lunch, because this is hungry work. He made himself a sandwich. I did not write down what kind of sandwich.
I kind of want to know for some reason.
I know, and it's in the book, and the book's downstairs, so I'm not going to go get it. But also just to mention, I got all of this information from this book called Righteous Carnage, which I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy it because it's like an unpleasant topic, but I thought it was well written and well researched. So anyway, so he made himself a sandwich, and then after
I'm Googling
lunch,
to find out what it is.
What kind of sandwich did John List make?
It's not telling me. I'm upset.
I feel like it's in the book. I'll look, and we'll figure it out. So then he gets in the car and he drives to Westfield High School, and he watches John Jr. play in his soccer game. And John Jr. gets in the car and they drive home, and they come in through the house, through the front door, and John shoots John Jr. 10 times.
Oh my god.
Yes, and that is because, as evidence later shows, John Jr. is the only one who figured out what was going on and fought back.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other ones were shot so quickly in the back of the head, or the side of, in the case of his mother, right in the side, that she would not have even had time to react. Yeah. But John Jr., it does not say if he, saw the blood from his family members and realized what had happened, or realized something was wrong, or if he turned around as his dad was about to shoot. But in any case, he fought back, so he ended up being shot 10 times. So John then placed the bodies of his wife and children on sleeping bags in the ballroom, and he left his mom where she was. He didn't move her at all.
Did they say it was because she was too heavy? Like, she was all the way upstairs?
I think so. I think he just didn't see the point in dragging her all the way downstairs with everybody else. Yeah, there was no point, I guess. So then he goes to his study, and he sits down at his desk, and he writes a 5-page letter to his pastor, which the police later find on the desk. So in the letter, it's very long, but basically the gist of it is that he killed his family because he saw too much evil in the world, and he wanted to save their souls before they were corrupted. And he thought if he killed them, this is what he claims, he thought if he killed them, he was sending them to heaven. He then cleans the crime scene, cleans up all the blood and everything, changes his clothes, obviously. He calls the milk and newspaper delivery services and puts them on a vacation hold for 3 months. And he does the same with the mail delivery to the house. He turns on a classical music station over the house's intercom system and blasts it throughout the entire house. And then he gets all of the pictures off the walls, all of the pictures off the mantle, all of the pictures out of photo albums. And keep in mind, this is 1971, so the only way to have your pictures, obviously, was to have them printed. And he systematically cuts his own face out of every photo.
What the fuck?
And then gets rid of the faces.
Oh my god.
Oh, there's a reason. You'll find out. So after he does this, he leaves the house, locks the door. He mails letters that he wrote to his children's schools and part-time jobs, explaining that the family had left town for a few weeks to visit Helen's ailing mother in North Carolina. So that would explain why they're not going to school and work, right? Mm-hmm. So as a side note, Helen's mother really was sick, which caused her to cancel a trip to Westfield. And John later said if she had visited when she was supposed to, she would have been his sixth victim.
Oh my god.
Because she was supposed to be there during the murders, but she got sick and couldn't go. Yeah. So because the family was very reclusive and never socialized with their neighbors, like nobody really thought anything was going on when they didn't see them. The neighbors did notice that the lights were on in the house 24 hours a day, but again, they thought these were very weird people, and so they just didn't do anything. But eventually, the light bulbs began to burn out one by one, which to me is extremely creepy. Like, can you imagine this, like, bizarre family next door to you, and their lights are always on, and then as you're looking, they're, like, flickering out one at a time? Like, that's so scary. So, obviously, when that started happening, the neighbors called the police because something was wrong, right? So, the murders were discovered on December 7th, so that's a month after they died. I cannot imagine what it was like for the police going into that crime scene. I mean, first of all, how it must have smelled.
So he did turn the air conditioning on full blast before he left, but that didn't really help much.
But this
apparently.
was 70s air conditioning, so I cannot imagine that it did very much.
You
but
can
it
look
must
at
have
the
stunk.
photos too.
Oh yeah, you can see the pictures.
I wouldn't
them.
advise it, but if you're like me, you'll go do it anyway. So.
That's my problem, too. Someone says they wouldn't advise it, and I'm like, as I'm Googling it already. Yeah. But the music was still blasting over the intercom. I mean, I just can't even imagine. You know, it's like a scene out of a movie.
Classical music, and it's like frigid music in there. And
I guess it was
light
organ
bulbs
music playing.
Ugh.
I know! And the light bulbs are flickering on and off? Hell no. No, thank you.
I'm laughing, but I'm not like...
But, I know. But, like, it's just so bizarre that it's... Yeah, I get it. So, there had been no violent crimes in Westfield since 1963. So that's 8 years. The police were completely out of their depth. I mean, they were just baffled from, like, step one. So they did... So, here you go, Miranda. So they did launch a nationwide manhunt for him, but there were no reliable photographs because he had cut his face out of every single picture. And, so they really had nothing to go on. They had nothing. So they do find the family car at JFK, which is the airport that services New York City. But there was no evidence that John had boarded a flight. Now, obviously, at that time, you could easily book a ticket under a fake name, right? It was not like it is now. Not even close.
Right.
You know. So Alma's body was returned to Michigan and buried next to her husband, Helen, and the children were buried side by side in Westfield. Breeze Knoll, which was the house, remained empty until August 1972, so about a year later, when it was destroyed by arson, a crime which to this day remains unsolved. And the skylight, this will turn out to be important later, the Tiffany skylight turned out to be a signed Tiffany original, which in 1971 would have been worth $100,000 if it was sold. In today's money, it would be worth between $600,000 and $700,000.
Oh my god!
So John List had vanished off the face of the earth, right? They had nothing. They were baffled. So where was he? Well, after leaving the house, he drives to JFK and parks the car. And then he goes to the train station. And he takes the train from New Jersey to Michigan. And then another train from Michigan to Colorado. So by early 1972, he had settled down in Denver and took a job as an accountant. He began using the name Robert Peter Clark, which was the name of one of his college classmates, who later claimed that he barely knew him, so he didn't know why he picked his name. And he basically just was living his life. He was doing well. He worked at this accounting job until 1979. And then from 1979 to 1986, he had a job as a comptroller for a box manufacturer outside Denver. He joined a Lutheran church. He was a very, very religious person. He ran a carpool for shut-in congregation members. He would drive them to and from services and to and from Bible study. And at one Sunday service, he met an Army exchange clerk named Dolores Miller, and they got married in 1985. And then in February 1988, the couple decided to relocate back to the East Coast, and they moved to Midlothian, Virginia, and he got another accounting job, obviously. So at this point, it's been 17 years since the crime. Police, FBI, no one has anything, right? After 17 years, they have nothing. But in late 1988, a show debuts on TV that I'm sure we have all watched called America's Most Wanted. And they decide to cover the List case in May 1989. So because there are no pictures of him, the producers decide, I guess John Walsh probably and the rest of the producers decide that a sketch is not going to cut it, right? So they commission Frank Bender, who is a forensic artist, to make a life-size, age-progressed bust of John List. You can find pictures of this thing. It is fucking bananas looking. It looks real. It is so good. God. It is so impressive. He decides to keep the horn-rimmed glasses that List was wearing at the time of the murders, and he goes into so much detail that he includes the surgical scar that List had behind his ear, which I think he was wounded in the Army, and that's what the surgery was from. I can't remember. I did not write it down. But it was, not a tiny scar. I mean, it was a couple inches long.
Yeah.
And they show this bust from every angle. They close up, zoom out. I mean, the whole shebang. So that night, a woman in Denver was watching the show, and she calls the 1-800 number. And she says, you know what's really funny? This bust looks like my old neighbor, Bob. And Bob and his wife moved to Virginia. And you know what? Bob had a big scar behind his right ear. I think this might be Bob. So, on June 1st, less than 2 weeks after the show was broadcast, John List was arrested at his job. Unfortunately for them, he refused to admit that he was John List. He continued to insist that his name was Robert Clark until February 16th, 1990. So that's a full 9 months later, where they finally have managed to track something down to identify him. They get a hold of the Army, and they get his fingerprint records from the Army, and they are able to match Bob Clark, quote unquote's prints with John List's prints from the Army, and he finally admits who he is. So this has been 19 years now after the murders. He almost got away with it. He's old at this point.
Yeah.
So he ends up taking the case to trial. He does not want to plead guilty. He testifies, of course, because, what other defense does he have except to try and defend himself? So, he testifies that by the time of the murders, his family was into a deep financial crisis. They were extremely broke. They could not afford to continue living in the house. The bank that John had worked at had gone out of business, but he did not tell his family. So instead, what he would do is he would go to the train station every single day like he was going to work, and he would sit there and read until it was time to come home.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Like Girl on the Train.
Exactly like Girl on the Train. I know. I kind of wonder if that's where she got the idea. He skimmed money from his mother's bank account in order to pay the mortgage. I think he had taken somewhere between like $5,000 and $10,000 from his mother without her knowing. So he said that he was also dealing with Helen's alcoholism, which was documented, and she also suffered from untreated tertiary syphilis. This was proven, so he was not just saying this to smear her name. Helen contracted the illness from her first husband and knew that she had it, but hid it from everyone, including doctors, for 18 years.
Wow.
After she got it. She insisted that she and John get married in Maryland because at that time, most states required pre-marriage testing for syphilis, and Maryland did not.
I did not even know that was a thing.
Yes, that used to be a thing. It may still be a thing in states. I don't know.
Wow.
Some states, but yes. So the disease was finally revealed in 1969, after a doctor did like a complete workup of her and tested for it, probably without her knowing, and revealed the results. But at that point, the combination of alcoholism and syphilis had turned her into a paranoid recluse who would publicly humiliate John by comparing his sexual prowess unfavorably with her first husband. And again, this is something that was proven. I mean, she did this in front of other people. You know, of course, this does not justify her being murdered and his whole family being murdered. But I just want to make it clear that I'm not saying, like, oh, this is what John List says happened, you know, because I don't give a shit what he says. You know, this is something that was, like, witnessed by other people. And as everyone knows, syphilis eats your brain, and it makes you lose it if it's not treated. So a court-appointed psychiatrist interviewed John and said that he suffered from OCD and that he only saw two solutions to his financial troubles, which were accept welfare or murder his family. That was it. And the psychiatrist testified that John did not see welfare as a viable option because that would expose his family to ridicule and violate everything that he had been raised with, which is he was not providing for his family, so he was a failure as a husband and therefore a failure as a man. Right? Thank you, rigid gender roles. So on April 12th, 1990, John was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. Obviously, he did it. Obviously, it was premeditated. He refused to accept responsibility for his actions, saying that they were caused by his disturbed mental state at the time, but the judge didn't buy it. And he said, John Emil List is without remorse and without honor. After 18 years, 5 months, and 22 days, it is now time for the voices of Helen, Alma, Patricia, Frederick, and John Jr. to rise from the grave. And he then sentenced List to 5 consecutive life terms. List appealed his conviction, saying that he suffered from PTSD due to his time in the military, and saying that his confession letter was a protected communication because it was written to his pastor, so like the seal of the confessional. But the appeals court denied both motions. The PTSD basically because he'd never been diagnosed with it ever, and the letter they denied because he was not like in a confessional and he wasn't talking like one-on-one with his pastor. This was a letter that was left out for anyone to find, basically.
Yeah.
You know, it may have been one thing had he mailed it to the pastor, but it was just left on his desk for whoever walked in the house to find, right? So he kind of takes responsibility later in life, saying that he wishes he'd never done it. But, like, that's about it. And then he does die of pneumonia in prison in 2008 at age 82. So
I didn't realize he lived to be 82.
He sure did. He lived he lived a nice long life. So all in all, he ended up only serving 12 years in prison. So he had more time free after he committed the murders than the time that he served in prison for the murders.
It's insane.
This was also a basis for like a 5-hour Lifetime original movie, which I watched in junior high when I was home with a stress headache, like I used to be all the time. And that's how I first heard about this case. I'm pretty sure that Beau Bridges plays John List, but I could be wrong. Yeah, this case is just great. I mean, it has everything, right? It has murder, it has syphilis, it has Tiffany, it has, you know, him on the run, it has fake identities, it has him marrying this poor second woman who obviously divorced him, like, the minute he was arrested.
Weren't they watching that broadcast together?
I think
or is that a rumor?
People have said that. That was not in the book.
Okay.
And it was also not on Wikipedia. Not that Wikipedia is always reliable, but Wikipedia did reference the book a lot.
Okay.
Like, most of the references from Wikipedia were things from this book, which, again, it seems like is very well researched. I mean, he had, like...
It was very detailed.
Footnotes. It's an extremely detailed book. Like, if you want to know everything about their lives, you read this book. I personally liked that because I find that so many true crime books just, like, spend 90% of the time on the murder. Just, like, all the nasty, gory details.
Yeah.
Whereas this was, like, trying to really humanize who these people were, you know? These were people who lived full lives. Well, besides the kids, you know, the mom and
the grandmother.
John. Yeah. And... Right, I guess I meant List's mom.
His mom.
Yes,
mom.
Alma. John and Helen, I mean, these were people who lived, like, full lives before they were killed. And I thought that was... I liked that, personally. But it is a very detailed book. I was saying before we started that my notes really could have been, like, 50 pages.
Oh, yeah.
If I had... And it took me a lot of work to condense it down to 3 pages. Like, I left out a lot of stuff. Like, there was a woman in New Orleans, I think, who saw the broadcast and called and said she thought it was her husband. And they, like, seriously investigated him.
There's always so many of them. They're like,
yeah,
my boyfriend did it. Or, yeah, I think.
But, like, how do you think that their marriage recovered after that? That's always my question.
Tell him.
Yeah.
I don't think it says, but, like, let me look. Because that was I saw that on the Wikipedia page. I don't think that was in the book. I just remember reading it on Wikipedia. But let me see if I can. Anyway, I can't find it right now. But she, like, thought it was her husband. And she, like, called the FBI. And she's like, it's my fucking husband. He's John List. And...
Stop.
So I always wonder... Excuse me. I always wonder, after those false calls, like, how does their relationship ever recover? I don't think Sergio would ever forgive me if I thought he was a mass murderer.
Well, if she really thought he was John List, or he had done something that terrible, there's no way she would have let onto it to him. Because that would put her in danger.
Sure, but once the FBI came and started interviewing him...
Yeah.
investigating him, because I'm gonna try and find this and post it on the blog because it's weird, but, like, he has to finally, like, provide an alibi, and he does. He finally provides an alibi that it was not him.
He didn't have to know it was her, though. It could have been the neighbor, like it actually was John List's old neighbor. Like, it could have been anybody who saw America's Most Wanted and, like, knew him.
What must your relationship be like if you could honestly believe that your partner was a mass murderer?
Oh, terrible.
I don't care what I saw on TV. I could never believe that Sergio would actually hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no.
Never.
No, I couldn't believe that either.
No. What must she have thought about her husband that she saw it and she was like, yep,
well, he probably
that's
did
it.
He probably did some other terrible thing, I'm sure. If she
Yeah,
really
I
thought
mean,
that he was...
I have no idea. I want to know more. I want to know more about people who call America's Most Wanted and say, no, it's definitely my husband. And then it's not.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, they're probably just genuinely afraid.
Oh, no,
I mean, like,
I don't think she did it, like, to fake it. I think she was sincere.
Oh, no, I know that, but I'm saying, like, there are some people out there who just really don't trust anyone.
That's possible. It could
You
be
know,
something
and
like that.
people kind of give you this idea of, like, I don't know, like, you see all these cases of men beating their wives or men killing their wives or, you know, stuff like this happening, and the women have no idea about it, you know? So,
Oh, yeah.
I guess you could say, like, in a way, what's to say that that woman's any different than one of us?
Oh,
know?
I know.
Like, so
I
think,
know.
yeah, so I think maybe some people just feel like they don't really know what the signs are, and if they look like the person, then they might think, oh my god, like, they tricked me.
Right.
So I guess I could see it. I don't see it necessarily being an issue with the relationship, but more so being just genuine fear.
Yeah.
Not really knowing who you can trust, which I think is fair.
I guess, to an extent. I mean,
Yeah.
I could see that. I can see it to an extent. I think not trusting your partner to the point that you, like, easily believe that they could be a mass murderer who would kill their own children is like a little bit more extreme than like
well, I'm
having
also
trust
kind of wondering
issues.
like how long have they been together? Do you know?
I can't remember. It like they had been married like after the murders had happened, so it could have been anywhere from like 5 years to like all 19 years. You know,
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna try and find the story again because I was just doing a bunch of googling
about that. Because the more I think about it, I'm like, so with how detailed that bust was, you know.
Right. Like, I want to know what this guy looked like.
Was he a doppelganger? You know, was he like a real ringer for List? And that's why she was like, I don't want to believe this, but oh my god, he looks exactly like that.
That's what I'm kind of thinking.
Well, and the fact that the FBI seriously investigated it. Yeah. Right? That the FBI didn't take one look at the guy and be like, yeah, no.
Wow.
Yeah. You know,
because they kept going. They kept going into it.
I mean, it was like a couple weeks. They were investigating this guy. And like I said, he finally had to provide an alibi that was I can't remember what it was, but it was something that like was airtight. Yeah. Like, you know, he was in jail or something. I can't remember.
But again, they had nothing. So maybe that's why they seriously pursued pretty much every tip that they got.
I'm sure they did. Know? I mean, he was in the wind. If America's Most Wanted had not done that, then he would never have been caught.
Yeah. He would have gotten
No one would have ever known what happened to him. He would have died as Bob Clark. You know?
That's so frightening. Mm-hmm.
Isn't that scary? And, like, nowadays it would be so much harder to do. Just because you have, I mean, a footprint everywhere. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, probably people that you don't even know have pictures of you on their phone. Just, like, in the background. Mm-hmm. Right? Oh, yeah. So, it would be so much harder.
Wow.
I actually the audiobook that I was trying to finish today at work, that was kind of one of the plot points was her trying to figure out who this woman was, and this woman like refused to have her picture taken, and that was why, because she was like on the run.
Oh.
Yeah, but John List was an interesting case. I mean, it's bizarre. I mean, it's like he just was like, well, I don't have any money, so I guess I have to kill my whole family now. Mm-hmm. I mean, just how you make that leap from I lost my job to now I need to go and murder my whole family in cold blood. It's just beyond my reasoning, probably because I'm not, you know, nuts.
Yeah.
But
some kind of disconnect from empathy there completely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And again, it's almost that he saw his family as, like, property. Mm-hmm. Like, his like trophies of like, oh, see, I'm this good family man. I have this wife and I have these 3 beautiful children and I can afford to take care of my mother in her old age, right? And we live in this beautiful mansion. And then as it all comes crashing down, it's like, well, now I have to get rid of all the evidence that I was ever this person because then no one will know that I'm a total failure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. And it just blows my mind that he turned out to be such a dud because he was like extremely smart. Extremely smart. And you would think that someone like that would be able to be successful.
You would, but there are different types of intelligence.
Oh, well, and that's part of the thing is, I mean, if you notice, he changed jobs relatively often. I mean, he was never really in a job for a long time. And it's probably because he was a weirdo and he did not get along with his coworkers. And so despite how smart he was, like, people don't want people like that around. Right? You don't want to work with someone who's creepy, no matter how smart they are and how good they are at their job.
And who knows what kind of delusions were brewing in there, you know? Like, just because of... I don't want to blame religion, but let's say it's a good jumping off point for stuff like that, you know?
Oh, for sure. For sure, but I don't believe the excuse of, I thought there was evil in the world and my family would go to hell if I didn't murder them.
No, it's definitely a justification for his self-righteousness.
Well, and then, I mean, throwing himself back into religion after he moves to Colorado, I mean, I'm sure there was some guilt involved. You know, almost I can absolve myself of what I've done if I do these good deeds.
Well, because now he needs a ticket to heaven because...
Yeah, but all you have
mind,
to do is say that
it
you
works
feel
a
really
certain
bad.
way. It's like currency, you know? Like, if I kill them, they go to heaven. And then if I then do this repentance...
And I don't want to, I don't want to, offend anybody listening, but that's kind of the basis of Christianity, is that if you are sincerely repent, you can still get in.
I grew up Catholic, so I don't care if you're offended. I've been there.
I mean, same. So absolutely
I've been there,
offended.
so I get to say what I want to say.
I have been there, but one nice thing with Catholicism is that murder is a mortal sin. So
yeah,
you ain't
so there's
in.
that.
You're not getting in because you cannot be absolved of a mortal sin. It's not happening. So
tricky.
Yep, they are a little more bloodthirsty, which I can always appreciate. So, you know, but I mean, same thing. I mean, I was raised Catholic, and I always thought it was kind of bullshit that if you murdered somebody who did not have time to repent because they were murdered, that murder victim might go to hell. But you, the murderer, could repent, and you could still get in.
Yeah.
I always thought that, again, as a Catholic, that never bothered me on our side because you can't get in because it's a mortal sin. But other Christian religions, it always kind of bothered me that, but that's not fair because the murder victim didn't get a chance to repent. You know, they were murdered. That's BS. Religion.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree.
It's crazy.
I've just went down this, path.
I know.
I don't have an opinion because I didn't grow up religious. I don't really like religion, so...
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not saying that
That's
I
my 2
like
cents.
it. I'm just saying that it always really boggled my mind.
Yeah.
It just didn't seem fair, you know? Anyway, it's John List. He was nuts. He was on the run for a long time. He almost got away with it, but John Walsh went out and got him. I love John Walsh. I used to love America's Most Wanted when I was a kid. Oh my god, I would never miss it.
You can't stream it anywhere unless you buy
sucks.
whatever service it was on, unless you buy access to that.
That sucks. That show was great.
Because I've looked for it so many times.
We'll just have to make do with Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, I like Unsolved Mysteries, but after I watched a couple of seasons, I was like, okay, I get it.
I like watching it because, again, so when I was in high school, my first 2 years of high school, I missed so much school with tension headaches. They would be so bad I couldn't walk. And so I would just stay home and like read and watch TV all day. And on Lifetime, from 1 to 2 would be Unsolved Mysteries. And then from 2 to 4 would be a Lifetime movie. And then from 4 to 6 would be another Lifetime movie, unless it was like the John List one, which took up the entire 4 hours with commercials.
Wow.
And, yep, that's what I would do. So watching Unsolved Mysteries, like, you know, it takes me back. I'm like, oh my god, I remember this episode.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at QOTD Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/QOTD Podcast, Tumblr at queensofthedamnpodcast.tumblr.com, and YouTube at Queens of the Damn Podcast.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and TuneIn Radio. You can also follow us on our blog, queensofthedamnpodcast.wordpress.com, to find bonus content and extra information on our episodes. If you would like to donate to our show, you can find us at patreon.com/QOTD podcast, where you can receive special perks as a listener for becoming a monthly patron. If you would like to make a one-time donation, you can send it to QOTDpodcast@gmail.com on PayPal. We'll see you next week.